What the Foundation series does better than the Asimov novels? Okay, I hate that right there because they're saying this TV show is better than the books. Again, these books have been in the public conscience, especially with sci-fi readers, for decades now. And so just to have the audacity to say that the series is better than the Asimov novels, it's like, why are you saying something you're adapting, that the adaptation is better than the original? If that is so, why didn't you just be inspired by Asimov's novels and then do something else, which they should have done? They absolutely should have done with this series. Moving on. Executive producer Robin Asimov reveals this is the series' strong suit. By the way, this picture here, this is supposed to be Harry Seldon, and this is supposed to be Gail Dornick. Now, Gail Dornick is not really seen in the book. He has like 2 chapters. He meets Harry Seldon like a couple years before Seldon dies, and he's really the impetus that helps the Foundation move forward. In the books, and you can see concept art of this man, of this character. Harry Seldon is at death's door when you meet him. He's a couple years before passing away, before he starts on this mission. And this guy really shouldn't be this young if he's Harry Seldon. He's not Harry Seldon because Harry Seldon is an old man. I can't stress that enough. That's what makes him interesting. That's what makes him unique as a character. The supposed savior of the Foundation trilogy with this plan is an old man, and he commences his mission before he dies. That's cool. I don't know why they had to make Harry Seldon young. Robin Asimov, the daughter of Isaac Asimov, is an executive producer for Foundation, and she brings firsthand knowledge of her father's vision to the series. I would say this is pretty deceptive because basically, she's his daughter, and so by default, she has every authority to greenlight whatever for her father's vision, to bring his books to the TV screen. I don't care if she's the daughter of Isaac Asimov. Maybe they had a close relationship, but I don't know about that. Or maybe they had an estranged relationship. I don't know about that either. It actually doesn't matter. Just because she's Isaac Asimov's daughter doesn't mean she should be executive producer. What I have read about this show, I haven't watched this show, I'm not hate watching this show, but what I've read about the show is it's so different from the books. So different. And so it doesn't matter. She does not have the executive authority to greenlight her father's vision just because she's related to, directly related to Isaac Asimov. It just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So that's not a valid bullet point. All right, second bullet point. Isaac Asimov prioritized storytelling over character development in his writing, but Robin appreciates how the show has given life to the characters and elevated the stories. The first is true. He actually did put in more of the timeline and the chronology of events inside the story rather than character development. But character development, in science fiction of the 1960s and 70s, yes, is very different. The interiority actually comes in the second book of the trilogy, with a little bit of Beta Daryl, the protagonist of the second book, and then also the mule. Actually, we do see a little bit later. There's a lot of interiority with the mule. So Isaac Asimov actually is capable of working with the interiority. Maybe not on the level of Arthur C. Clarke, but with something even like the Bicentennial Man, he can really create moving characters, like not just moving pieces inside the story, but he actually can really get you feeling for the character, even if this character, whether a main character or a featured character, has a very limited interiority. He knows how to work with character development with his stories. So it's not completely absent. And it's not even completely absent inside the Foundation trilogy. It's just not what we're used to in this modern culture, in this modern writing, where we have to just talk about our feelings all the time. And believe me, I love introspection, but I do want to make it clear that back in the 60s, unless you're working with like a character like HAL 9000, you're not going to be working with interiority like we see it today. So I'm going to make this argument, this is the second bullet point here, that it's not quite fair to say They're gonna insinuate, I think, a little later in this article that he has no character development. That's not true. Each of these characters involving the chronology of events, yeah, they have a short duration. They have maybe a handful of chapters and then they're gone. They're deceased because you're moving on to the next thing. But they are very dynamic in their short duration. And I think people just do not have these sensibilities now to read older classic fiction because it's like, well, I'm not in this person's perspective. I don't know what their internal conflict is. It's like, well, maybe you don't need it for their short duration. Maybe you just cue and home in on what is what is the reaction to something, and that is pretty telling of the character as well. So the third bullet point, and this is the point that really grinds my gears, having Robin Asimov on the production team allows the series to deviate from the original trilogy and incorporate elements from all 7 novels. I don't care how close you are to your daughter, to your brother, to your father, to your mother. Love your family. But this is a weird take on the daughter of Isaac Asimov greenlighting because she's the daughter, saying, well, it's okay to deviate from the source material and incorporate new elements of all 7 novels. You should have done something else instead of Asimov. Why are you doing Asimov? Anyway, let's move on. So anyway, just because she's his daughter, that's not valid. That's not any excuse. One of the biggest behind the scenes elements of Foundation, the show, is that the sci-fi series is in the best hands possible. Why? Because she's his daughter. Robin Asimov, the daughter of the author who brought Foundation to life, acts as executive producer. So you're repeating yourself, which means that she has firsthand knowledge of the elements that her father would like to see on the screen. During the interview, Robin addressed one frequent criticism that readers used to make about her father's body of work. A prolific writer, Isaac Asimov penned over 500 stories in his lifetime. He was a very prolific writer, sometimes alone, sometimes along with other writers. That means the acclaimed writer was more interested in getting his ideas on paper than to work on the characters he created to tell those stories. What moot point is that? Like, how did they come to that conclusion that because he wrote so many stories that he was more interested in getting his ideas on paper? Especially if you write short stories, it is absolutely possible to get into character development at a very quick pace and still be able to write 500 works in your lifetime. It's like, oh no, because he wrote so many stories, he only cared about getting his ideas on paper, not so much the characters. I'm like, that's dumb. Going into her quote, she says, I love the character development. This was not my father's strong suit. That's not true. She doesn't know her own father's writing. And not necessarily his interest per se. That I don't know. Maybe he wasn't interested, but he still was capable of doing such character development. It was all about the storytelling. And he did that so well that it was okay that his characters were a bit flat. That's also an untrue. Just because they didn't have any interiority or internal conflict, and some of them did, by the way. Some of them they did struggle with conflict, but they would confide their struggles with like an associate or with a political partner or something like that. They would be confiding in a close, a confidant, like someone who's a friend or someone who's in their workspace. These characters, while having little to no interiority, they were not flat. They were not a bit flat. They had their own dynamics in their own special way, their own unique way. So this is moot again. This is an invalid point. Moving on, she continues. She says, what David Goyer did was especially, I love the Cleon story. So Cleon, if you're not aware, he's the emperor that contends with Harry Seldon on trial at the start of the book. Apparently they did this kind of clone dynasty with the story. Interesting, like, and a lot of people actually like that. A lot of people said, I love this dynamics with the clone dynasty of the Cleon story. And it's like, well, then why didn't you just do your own story? If that was the strong point of this show that had nothing to do with what Asimov did, why didn't you just make your own original story based on this idea? Saying, oh, we were inspired by Asimov's empire, but we took it in this way. That would have been perfectly valid for them to do. And apparently a lot of people just love this part of the show. I was like, man, you jumped that opportunity there. You just were relying on Asimov's name, you were relying on the fame that his books had accrued over the decades, and then you decided just to do something different with it. Anyway, she goes on. He gave life to these characters, and it brought the story to another level. Yeah, yeah. The story was great anyway, but I think if my father had lived to see this, I think he would have been very, very impressed. I know you're his daughter, but how would you know? How would you know that would be true? Maybe you were close to him all his life, and maybe he expressed such things to you in his time, but he's gone. He can't speak for himself. What if he wouldn't have been impressed? Anyway, she goes on. My father would have loved to seen the characters come to life. Yeah, but they had their own life. They had their own vibrance. That's something that was not in his wheelhouse per se. It's like, yes, it was. You just don't know how to read your father's work. And I think that would have excited him. It's like the audacity of this woman saying this wasn't his specialty. Character development was not his specialty. I'm sorry I'm using that mocking voice. I probably shouldn't. I probably should have some respect. But the thing is, she's not respecting her own father's work. So I don't have the inclination of I'll be nice. I'll be nice, but it's like he knew how to develop characters. He knew. There are moments, especially in the second book and in the third book of his trilogy, where he knew how to work with interiority. You just got to read the books to see for yourself. And yeah, it requires a little bit more. You have to have some level of sensibility about how to read old classic literature. If you're used to reading the stuff now, yes, it's going to be different, but you have to look for it. And I'm not saying he's without faults. Isaac Asimov, he does have some weaknesses uh, regarding his writing that I'm happy to talk about in a different video. At the same time, I'm not going to go far as to say what's not true of his works. And this is what the show, and this is what the showrunners, and this is what the executive producers, including his daughter, are doing. All right, moving on. Having Asimov's daughter on the production team was certainly one factor that allowed the series creator David Goyer and his writing team to play around with the Foundation novel series and not stick strictly to the original trilogy. No, basically you're saying, hey, let's do whatever we want with the famous name and the famous series. That's all you're doing. And I have heard the name David Goyer, of course, by Professor Geek and Fan Man. I don't know to the extent of the damage he's done to DC, but apparently he's doing some damage now to the beloved sci-fi classics. Oh, he just needs to retire and go away. This article says that's why we've seen elements from all seven novels across the series. That's so bogus. That means you don't know how to adapt Asimov. Like, what's the point of adapting the Foundation trilogy when you do not know how to adapt to film the span of at least 500 years? Continuing, this is why we've seen all elements of all seven novels from the series, including the presence of the android Demerzel, who doesn't exist in the original trilogy from the 1950s, but was created by Asimov for the prequel novels in the 80s. So I have not read the prequels yet. I will read the prequels. So I don't know anything about this character, so I can't really comment. Based on what I've seen with everything else, they probably haven't done this android justice either. So, and to this point, even though Apple TV Plus is yet to announce the season 3 renewal, Goyer has told Collider that all episodes have already been written. Well, hopefully it doesn't come to fruition.